What did you eat for lunch?
I feel like today isn't a good representation because I'm going away tomorrow. So I have almost nothing. London. It's bank holiday weekend. I mean, not when people are listening to this, but
it isn't. You
Not
guys always
always a
have
bank
one, so
holiday.
it probably is one.
Anyway, I have hardly anything in. So my lunch was 2 crumpets. You know crumpets, do you?
No,
Do you know what they are?
no. I think we've talked about it. I've forgotten already.
I don't know if we have spoken about crumpets. I don't know that we have.
I see it as a little tasty cake. That's what
Mhm.
we had a little tasty cake crumpet thing. When I was growing up, it had butterscotch on top. And it was like, yeah, like a Twinkie
Well,
almost on the bottom.
you put the butterscotch on top. Oh
No,
no,
it
they
came
don't
like
come with
that.
it. No, that's not crumpets. Do you want to Google it?
I was wondering, I was like, is she going to tell me or is she going to make me Google it? It's fine.
Well, they're like,
You are avoiding this question.
they're like a bit like bread, but they're circular and they have holes in, and you toast them and you put things on them.
Okay, so you had 2 crumpets.
I had 2 crumpets. One had peanut butter on, and the other,
It's
so
an
like it's
English
going to
muffin.
open up a whole conversation.
It's an English muffin, Americans. That's what she's talking. She just called it crumpet. She meant in English.
No, an English muffin is something else. I think you're looking at the wrong thing.
No, this is
Share your screen.
sure an English muffin.
Share your screen.
Here we go.
Okay, yeah, that's a crumpet. What are you calling that? Where does it say English muffin?
That is what I'm looking at is an English muffin.
Okay, no. Type English muffin into Google and you'll see what an English muffin is. Because an English muffin is a thing,
I know.
but it's not that.
This.
Look, that's an English muffin. That's completely different to a crumpet.
Then the picture's deceptive because it has holes in it and stuff.
No, because that's
Looks
not
like
a
an English
muffin. The
muffin.
one that you just pointed at wasn't a muffin. It's not cut open. That's how it comes.
Oh, all right. Well, that's the difference then. Looks
Okay,
so
well
much like an English
you're gonna
muffin.
be here in a couple of weeks, so I'm gonna give you a crumpet.
I'll take it.
I feel
Tell
like
me more about your lunch.
I think this speaks to like the complexity sometimes of food, and especially when we're like explaining our food decisions, because now there's a whole other piece of this. I have habituated Nutella.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I said previously that that was like one food that I just wouldn't really have around most of the time. I'd have it occasionally. It's the Bon Maman chocolate spread. It's a small one, and I've had it for like 6 weeks. Crazy. That's crazy.
Okay. That's one of your ones. Did you habituate it on purpose or did it just occur?
Because I spoke about it. I think I spoke about it on the podcast and I did a reel on it. Because I had some and I ate it quickly, and then had another one and it was a little bit slower, but still ate it quicker. And I was saying, I just think this is a food that I couldn't necessarily habituate, that I wouldn't want to have in the house because it would just call to me. And it doesn't. And I don't know what that means. It just feels like I'll go way off topic.
Look, it is off topic, but it's really important because I think that there's times where we feel like I could never have that food around and feel okay about that. And I think that for you to be saying that, I think it's a public service announcement. Because
it feels
I never thought I could be like that with ice cream. You know what I mean? I really believed it never could be. So it just goes to show.
I want to kind of add with that. It's not that I thought having it around would make me binge, but just that it would always nudge me if it was there, and it just doesn't. And that is strange.
You know what I have in my house right now?
Granola. M&Ms? Oh, sorry, go on.
Granola.
Ah.
For lunch, you had 2, because the title of this episode, for those of you who missed it, and just click on it out of loyalty, is, but I don't know what to eat.
Mm-hmm. So I had the crumpets, and it wasn't quite enough. It wasn't quite enough for lunch.
Yeah.
And so
what was on top?
I had peanut butter on one, chocolate spread on the other.
Okay.
All I had left in the fruit bowl, because I'm going away, is an apple and a clementine. And I was like, okay, I'll have the apple. So I had the apple. Again, not quite enough, but I didn't really have anything else in. So then I had a Magnum.
Oh,
so it was a very strange
circle. We started talking this morning about the Magnum. Now I know how you got there.
And I was saying to Steph that my neighbor came and knocked on the door just to chat. No other reason but to chat. And I was halfway through a Magnum. And it's weird standing on your doorstep talking to someone while you're trying to gracefully eat a Magnum. But yeah, so for me, that was a very bitty lunch.
Bitty? And because? Can you just define?
Bitty, like bits.
Small? Oh, okay.
Yeah, like a few bits.
Like deconstructed lunch kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah. So I would say that is less usual for me to have a lunch.
It doesn't matter. It's still like what what drove you to those decisions, because whatever that is still a part of decision making.
Yeah.
So
But today it was pretty much all I had. So what I was thinking when I got up this morning, and I was thinking, I've hardly got any food in. I thought maybe I'll actually order in lunch. And they do these really nice like burrito bowls from the local Mexican. And I thought, I'm going to have one of them for lunch. And then I opened up the website to order one. And I looked at it and I thought, I think I want that for dinner. It feels like a dinner thing. So then I went back.
How
So
did
this
you
was
know?
the decision making.
Yeah.
I looked at it and it was kind of instinctual. And also part of me was going, I don't want crumpets for dinner. Because crumpets for me feels like a breakfast or a lunch thing. I think I would feel more cheated, whereas this bowl is much more flavoursome with all the spices and everything in. I thought that is going to be a more satisfying dinner. Right now, I just want to eat something to kind of get me through.
So part of it was practical.
Mm-hmm.
Part of your decision making was practical, which is a part of intuitive eating, by the way. Making decisions that just make sense, even if they're not exactly in alignment with what you wanted, which sounds exactly what happened. Like crumpets didn't sound like they were like so hitting the spot, but they're what you had and what's here and what makes sense. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then another factor there would be satisfaction, and also including like the time of day you prefer to be satisfied, because I actually might swap that, because I actually enjoy my lunches now. I'm more in a lunch. I'm in a place in my life where I think my body just likes breakfast and lunch more than it likes dinner. So my satisfaction is more in the afternoon. And that's a recent development, by the way, because I used to believe that dinner was the one that I should be like, that I would be like, oh, I would do exactly what you just described.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to realize that I actually think my body does better with being more satisfied at lunch. At dinner time, I'm just less invested. So that's been a learning curve for me too. But yeah, so to look at like what time of day it is and what you want this meal to be for you is part of that decision making.
Yeah. There was something about lunch about it, wanting it to just be very functional. I was still editing, so it was going to be eating while I'm working.
Yeah.
I think it might have been different if I was taking a proper break for lunch. Then maybe the burrito bowl might have been more enticing. Not sure.
This would have been a good one to do live, to see what people do, to get more input on the way people make decisions. But for now, you'll just have me and Sarah's experience.
So what did you have for lunch then, and why did you have it?
It is 10:51 a.m.
Oh, of course, breakfast.
Yes. So actually, last night, oh gosh, it was the day from hell. Not really, but like the way the evening stacked up last night, each of my children had activities back to back. Plus, I had shots to get in my knee, and then we had a second activity. So the runaround last night was chaotic. And as such, I did not have a dinner I had an early dinner, but it was too early. And then like later, I got hungry when I was home. So then I had like a snack at 10 p.m., which is not something I typically do. I'm usually like not hungry at that, but I was hungry. Yeah. So when I woke up this morning, typically I'm like hungry within the hour of waking up, certainly within 2 hours. And I usually have breakfast at that time. But today, because I'd had that 10 p.m., like I woke up and I wasn't even thinking about food at all, but I had to get on here early. So I also practically ate, and I had breakfast that I wasn't yet hungry for. If I had my clients later in the day, like I usually do, I would have waited longer. But because it was a practical thing, it was, number one, smaller than usual. And number two, it was just, I really didn't really factor in much of like what I had. It was because I didn't have time. So I have my 2 eggs and 2 pieces of toast, and that's what I had. And I wasn't also very hungry for it. So like I didn't, it wasn't one of those kind of meals. So it was more of I'll tell you the factors that go into that meal in particular for me. I need protein and carbs at breakfast, and having an egg with a toast and an egg with a toast, like 1 and 1 and 1 and 1, is satisfying to me. And it makes me feel like I'm like, my meal's like, it satisfies me much more than if I have like just the egg or just the toast. And I also really like that. It's like what I have most mornings anyway, usually with some other stuff on the side, but just didn't get there today.
So when you say you have that most mornings, what would be the difference on the mornings when you had something different?
Well, I would toast the bread longer. Like the way I had it was almost like too like regular, like it wasn't even barely toasted because I just didn't have time. The reason I was late Remember how I signed on? My video was off. I was eating and I was still like doing something. So I was really down to the wire. I would have toasted it longer. I usually put like a little olive oil on top with the spices. I just kept it as simple as possible. I didn't even have time to do that. So it would have been
That
more of a.
that wasn't quite what I meant. You said it's what you have for breakfast most mornings.
Yeah.
So on mornings when you don't have that, when you'd have a different breakfast.
Oh, I was telling you. Oh, gotcha. Well,
why
just
would
so you know, I usually have a more fancy egg and toast with something on the side. And sometimes I have one piece of toast and sometimes I have two, by the way, just to put it all out there for different reasons. But other things, gosh, it's rare that I'll have other things, but sometimes I'll have yogurt with berries and nuts and stuff.
Just because you fancy it, or because you haven't got the rest? What would normally make you? Because I'm guessing if this is your usual go-to, you normally do this without thinking. So to do something different, sounds like it would be more of a deliberate choice, or because it wasn't available.
Yes. So what would make me make that choice? A different choice? Sometimes I get a sense in myself that I don't want eggs. It's not a lot, but every now and then I'll have an interoceptive awareness, which is that internal sense of like body cues that I feel like, and the thought of an egg doesn't feel like, okay, I'm not leaning into it. I'm leaning away from it. So on a day like that, I would say, okay, I don't want an egg. So what else do I have? And then I would go to my second go-to option, which is yogurt, that because it's easy and I like it. Another reason I might have something different is just because I feel like I've been having eggs a lot and I just want to change it just for variety. And another reason I might not have eggs is because we don't have them or I've run out or something and that's practical. I don't know if there's any other reason that I wouldn't, except sometimes. No, I think the rest, if I have other factors going on, I sometimes add more protein. That might be something or a reason I have additional things or something else. Because sometimes I'll have like a dinner for breakfast kind of thing, very rarely. But sometimes if I feel like I really need a hearty thing, like that hunger's high, I might have leftovers.
So Stefanie, you had 25 years of an eating disorder. Now, all this stuff was pretty, I was going to say screwed up. Let's say dysregulated.
It's okay.
There's a nice word for it.
No, just be real. Yeah.
And then really only in the last, 4 or 5 years is the coming out of that. And then now you're sitting here talking to me going like, I'm just wasn't feeling that today. My body's just leaning away from it. And like, how do you get from a 25-year eating disorder to being able to recognize these things?
Well, that's what this podcast is all about.
No, but specifically around making these food choices.
Okay. I can probably rattle that off. 1, I am not battling my appetite. I'm not battling restriction. So I'm not gravitating towards every single food in mass amounts and feeling scarcity about everything. Everything feels safe and stable inside of my body. That feeling is game changer. Like, has anyone out there who's listening ever felt like, that the conversation everyone's having right now with Ozempic about like food noise, it gets rid of the food noise. I don't have food noise and I'm not on Ozempic, right? So just not restricting anymore mentally and physically has made my food noise, like, I'm not saying I never have food noise, but it's not a thing. Like, so that is game changing. That's why people love that idea so much. That's why people talk about it so much and want to be on Ozempic so much. So it's rid of the food noise. You can also do that if you're restricting by not restricting, or it's possible. So that's probably the biggest reason why, because if you're not having all the noise and all of the scarcity inside the body that's saying, I want everything, or I want nothing, then you can hear the communication signals coming from your body. I never would have been able to hear myself not want an egg or whatever if my body was too busy frantically seeking food. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't have come through. So that's answer number 1.
Yeah. I'm struck and thinking about the subtlety of this stuff when we're getting a sense of what we want. And what popped into my head is when I was a teenager, I smoked cigarettes.
Tell me that. I thought that I never was enticed, but go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was pretty cool when I was younger.
It's not cool anymore,
I know. That's why I don't anymore. I mean, it's because I have so much respect for my body.
I mean that
8 of intuitive eating. Is it 8 or 9? I can't remember. And I can remember when I first started playing around with cigarettes, saying to myself, well, I don't want to get addicted to cigarettes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to smoke. And then when I experience my first craving, that's when I'll stop. So I won't get to the point that I'm addicted. I genuinely had no idea really what a craving was or what it felt like. I was expecting the craving to feel like a physical pang or something in my body. Sounds strange now, but I didn't understand what cravings even were. I hadn't really used that language around food. I didn't know what it was. And so it wasn't until I can remember it clearly one evening where I was literally going around my room, like gathering up all my change, trying to find enough money to get together to go and buy some cigarettes, that I thought, oh no, I'm addicted. Because I didn't realize that really all a craving was, certainly for me at that time that I was aware of, was that I would just think about a cigarette and want one. Didn't know that was a craving. I thought I just wanted a cigarette. Couldn't tell the difference, you know?
That's interesting. Like the habit loop. Who talks about that? Judson Brewer? It isn't even him, although we're speaking about that. But what's the book about the way habits work?
There's Atomic Habits. There's
Atomic Habits.
Tiny.
James Clear.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm conceptualizing what you're saying. So you were assuming you're equating almost like the habit response with a craving, which is what is suggested, yes, by people who are right about habits in terms of the way we eat. Do you think that they can be different?
Well, that my experience of the craving was I just wanted a cigarette. I didn't realize that that's all a craving was. And so I'm just wondering with food, for somebody listening to this who might think, you know, they've got a 25-year eating disorder or more, or just most of their life has been this, that they imagine that the idea of knowing what you want to eat is so clear. It's like your body's going like, oh, we're low on iron. You really fancy some red steak. And you feel it like it's a proper sensation, as opposed to it comes more as a thought, right? Yeah, go on.
This ties in with what I was asking, because I think there is a spectrum. So what you're talking about of the thought of I want this thing can be so simple, but it can also, I think you can also have cravings that are more than just that. I think you can have cravings that are like, I really want, because I have been in my pregnancies, I experienced cravings in that classic pregnancy way, not as much as they say you will, but there were times where I felt a craving that was more than just I think I'd fancy that. You know, it was like, you had me now in the snowstorm, like go driving.
But how did it feel? How did it feel in your body?
Physical.
Your mind is good. How? What?
I just had to. Like, it felt urgent. I felt urgency. And specifically this. So a craving that I had during that time was for, I talked about this too, the lemon ice but it had to be with bits of lemon as opposed to, because I could have gone to the store and gotten the kind that's just like all the same consistency, but that wasn't what I wanted. I mean, the craving was so specific that it included this textured component and nothing else would do. So I think there are times, and that was pregnancy, so it was very magnified, but I think that there can be such a spectrum of cravings that come through as just a preference or like an inclination towards, or even just like a passive yes. I would that yes, all that yes, you know, but it can also feel like more than that. And I think that in recovery too, sometimes it can be quite simple. And I think your point is really good in that it doesn't, I think most people probably conceptualize intuition and interoception as clear, on the other side of it, this clear understanding of what they want. But it can really also be very just like what you're describing, you know, but it can be both.
Because I've shared before, it would have been now 19, 20 months ago when I had that experience where I just completely went off meat. I went to a pub to have a roast dinner because I just got off of this vegetarian retreat where there was no food morality. Food wasn't spoken about at all on that retreat. I thought in advance, I am going to want something meaty after 3-4 days of vegetarianism. So I'm going to go and have a roast dinner. Got to the pub, looked at the menu, even just the smell and the thought of meat. It was just like a no, thank you. Like in my body, it wasn't as strong as repulsion because it wasn't linked to disgust. It was just
no.
And then that went away for a long time. And then I started having inklings where I was like, actually, I do fancy a bit of meat. I want a bit of fish. I want a bit of this. But interestingly, the one meat that has stayed with is chicken. I have not enjoyed chicken in 20 months. And I used to love chicken. Chicken would have been one of the meats that I would have been, I can't imagine not having it. And now I've had it a few times only when people have fed it to me and I don't have a choice. And there's just something in me that's going, I just don't want this. Whereas I would call a craving sometimes for red meat, where my mind is going, I want some red meat. And I go with that because I know that my iron runs low anyway. And
Mm.
it
Well,
just feels instinctual. And I'm happy to just honor that.
we don't know the exact, like, what's the distribution of psychology going on versus physiology going on. Because even as you're talking about that, when you're saying iron, right, like there could be a physiological drive that's manifesting somehow in neurotransmitters and chemicals in your body that's producing this desire that comes through as a thought or as an inclination towards. But we don't know, like, to what extent what's what. Because when I'm talking about being pregnant, I would assume that has to do that intensity of that craving was more physiological and potentially even blood sugar based. I don't know. But I also am like, well, is that even true? Because when I was pregnant, my psychological thing also became very heightened. And, is it a product of that? We don't know, like, exactly the formula here, but it kind of almost doesn't matter because, well, it does. I think everything matters. But it's also like there is a connection between the mind and the body. There is a connection between physiology and psychology. Depending on where it starts, I don't know. I'm sure it's concerned either or and affect the other. And also to differentiate between a craving and knowing what to eat. So, like, the topic of the conversation being, what do I want to eat, doesn't have to even involve a craving.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be that could be a part of it. How do we understand our cravings and our actual food desires? But also, that's not the only thing that goes into making a decision about what to eat.
Exactly. There's a practical element of even what's available. There's a whole anticipation piece of it as well, because we have a sense of, like, is this the last thing we're going to eat today? Is this the end of the day? Is it first thing in the morning? Do we have a sense of when we're going to eat next? All of those things are going to impact our desire in the moment or lack thereof for food or specific foods.
That's true. I'm thinking about, like, okay, if I were to list, what are the factors that go into, not every time, but what are the factors that can go into deciding what to eat? Some of them would be practical, what we've been talking about, accessibility and just what's easy, what's convenient, makes sense time-wise. But also psychological of, like, yeah, is this the last, do I have a FOMO about it? Can I have crumpets now and a burrito bowl later? Like, is there room for that thing I really want later? that could be part of that decision making. Cravings, preferences, but also habits. I think I don't know that we underestimate it, but I think it might be tricky to talk about habits as part of, because there's such this, like, intuitive eating would suggest, or it feels like it should suggest, that when you're making decisions about foods, that you're making them from this really aligned place each and every time, when in fact, no, there's not time for that. But I couldn't live my life like that. It would just be too complicated. I have to go with, like, what I habitually eat, because that's just what makes life run more smoothly. Like, I can't always be ordering this or getting to the store to get that, or, it's kind of like what's available. There is a practicality to that. So then it becomes more about what are the preferences among the things in my home right now that I have access to that would factor in. But not that it's necessarily like some kind of, I'm not sitting down before everything I eat and being like, is this exactly what I want? But over time, you do get to know more and more what kinds of things you do like from a texture perspective, from a flavor perspective, sweet or savory, cold or warm. Like, you sort of get to know these things about yourself, and you also get to know the cues that communicate to you when they're present, when those preferences are present, or when they're changing. Because I know that, like, right now I'm very into smoothies again, and I haven't been. I've been, like, anti smoothies for a while because it was winter. I think like, they didn't appeal to me. And now that the sun's been out and I've been outside more, I can feel, like, when I think about a smoothie, I'm like, yes, like, that's what I want. Like, I just know that because I'm more used to hearing the kinds of suggestions that are coming from within me, whether those are psychological, practical, physiological, whatever, that point me towards a yes. I forget the point.
I was just thinking then, what if I'd sat down at lunchtime and thought, what do I want out of anything I could have right now, even if it wasn't available?
Yeah.
What
Let's
would be
do that.
like
That's
my
a fun
ideal
game.
thing right now? And I where my mind went, again, it was just the first place my mind went. I don't know if I've spoken to you about it before or not, but when I lived in Ealing in London, there's a cafe called Beehive. and I feel emotional just thinking about Beehive because I just love that place. And they do these toasted, it's avocado, mozzarella, tomato, and it's got like this pesto oil in it as well. And they're just, I mean, even like my mouth is literally filling with saliva thinking about it. And I used to have these a couple of times a week. And then they do this turmeric, lemon and ginger and turmeric tea. It doesn't have any tea in it. It's basically lemon, ginger, turmeric, and honey. But the combination, because they juiced fresh turmeric in it as well, would just, that combination of that particular tea, and I'd normally add a little bit of extra honey in to make it quite sweet, and that sandwich, I used to just, I loved it. And so when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about that. And then I was like, and I'm going to London tomorrow. And on Saturday, I'm having breakfast at Beehive with my friend.
That's exciting. That's fun.
Are
you hungry right now?
I am a bit hungry, actually, yeah.
I feel like that would exacerbate it, right? So if you're hungry...
I feel ready to eat. So I will, as soon as we finish recording, I will be ordering, it will be an early burrito bowl today.
Okay. So it's important to note that I think you are more in tune with what you want when you're just on the early side of hunger, not the too late side of hunger and not the chronic side of hunger, but just the emerging sense of hunger. I think that's where you're more, I experienced the most understanding of what I want. And I really want to emphasize the early side of hunger, not the later side of hunger, and not the chronic state of hunger, which also speaks to why, there's this idea that like every time we want some food, we should eat it. Like this idea of, again, that's what anti-diet means, that every time you think of food, you should eat it. And Gentle Nutrition suggests, we've talked about this in episode 144, where we talk about that it's not going against your recovery to structure meals so that you are hungry for them, because it does offer you more sense of developing your interoception around food and being hungry for something, and then therefore that meal being more satisfying. So just as a little plug for that, because I think that's so often missed. But when you were talking about that sandwich, what you're describing in my cognitive mind, I'm like, that's right up my alley. I love that. I would totally order that. But also a sense right now of I don't want that. Like right now, I don't want that, which is interesting because I was thinking, how do I know? Like, why? Why is that? Why? And I was like, well, probably because I just had breakfast 2 hours ago. I'm not hungry for that. And I just had 2 pieces of bread. So like, I don't feel any, like I don't want, like I just had it. So I don't feel like, and that's not a cognitive thing. That's like I just had it. So I don't feel like that's not where my body's leaning because I just had it. I want something cold right now if I were to have something, and light, but that's because it's not my lunchtime yet. You know what I mean? So it's like there's factors that go into it. I guess what we're trying to do is break them down a little bit. There's a lot of them though. They're going to be different all the time, but you don't need to like have a notebook and paper and like a spreadsheet that's trying to figure out how this all works. It's something that I think the more you're stabilized inside and the more you're eating and your appetite feel more stabilized from regulated eating, and the more your emotions are stabilized, including your self-talk and your self-compassion, that those things naturally start to present themselves without you even having to think it through. Because I certainly never mapped all this out, it's just that it occurs to me now.
Mm-hmm. Do you find you have many moments where you're like, I don't know what I want to eat?
Yes. Many, no, but sometimes, yes.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts in kind of navigating that? And I appreciate it varies a bit, circumstance to circumstance, but how, let's say, I'll give you an example, that you're in a restaurant, so that there are options. You don't have to worry about getting food, preparing food, whatever. But you're like, I just really don't know what I fancy. How does the decision get made? What's the process for making a decision when you're just not sure?
It's interesting you ask it that way, because it's more likely to happen at home. Because at a restaurant, I just feel like things are more satisfying and I'm not preparing it. I think sometimes the reason I don't know what I want is because some of it would include my preparation and I don't want to prepare.
Okay.
But if I was at a restaurant, how would I decide? I have been in restaurants where I'm looking at the menu and nothing is shouting at me. You know what I would do in a situation like that? Well, first of all, if I was 10 years ago or 5 years ago, I would say, what do I want that I'm not allowing myself to have? First of all, you got to clear that out first, because sometimes we don't know what we want because we know what we want, but we don't want to want that.
Yeah.
So we're like, I really want this, but I'm not allowed. That's bad. So then, of course, we get stuck because we're not allowing ourselves to be satisfied. That's why we don't know what we want. But in the absence of that, where that's not a factor, I would probably at that point be like, what is something I've gotten before? Like I like to get salmon out because they make it so much better than I can. And I really like salmon. So I might look at the salmon and be like, all right, could I go for salmon? Like, is that fine? I don't know. If it was like a different kind of night out, I might be like, do I want to try something new that I've never had before? Like, is it that kind of do I feel like that kind of spunky right now? What other factors?
Similar to what you said about the salmon, but I might think, what are the things I wouldn't prepare at home?
Yeah, right.
Because I don't buy meat to prepare at home. Meat's only something I really eat at the house. I'm much more likely to order that in a restaurant.
Yeah. I also might look at the sides. I went to a restaurant on Saturday night and I actually didn't feel like, maybe I was sort of in that position. I ended up getting fish, but I didn't get it for the fish. I got halibut. I didn't really care about, I actually, it wasn't as good as I was expecting it to be. But I got it because on the bottom, they did this like first like street corn thing with this pureed, creamy, I don't know what it was, potato, something, some other vegetable fruit. And like they blended it all up and then they had this like this sauce on top. And I was like thinking about, ooh, that sounds really good with the corn bits and the fish, like that whole thing together, the texture of that. I'm such a texture person. That appealed to me more than like the halibut, as just the standalone, which it's not a standalone. So I might look at the side factors too, the textures and consistencies.
Would you ever let the server decide?
No, that's psychological.
I sometimes do. I mean, only if I'm caught between two things.
I see.
I wouldn't,
yes,
wouldn't say give me anything on the menu.
Okay,
but I have let them choose.
I have,
and I will if it gets to that point. I will go with their recommendation because sometimes someone can choose for you and you go, actually, I want the other. That doesn't normally happen. If it's got to the point where I'm letting the server decide, I'll go with what they say.
Yes, I've done that before because I don't want to make a decision, which leads me back to what I was originally talking about, and because I see this with clients, where the lack of like understanding of what we want, it actually has a little bit to do with I don't want to be the one preparing it. Like if you gave it to me, I would eat it if it was ready. But this idea of preparing, and because sometimes I think we want to be taken care of, and we don't want to be the one doing that, that gets in the way with this topic a lot, as does feelings of depression and feeling lower can very much impact feeling like there's nothing that appeals to us. There's nothing, we were not really interested in anything specifically. There's no oomph for anything. That can also coincide with feelings of depression.
I think when people are navigating, let's say recovery, so there's still a lot of food noise going on. It's all very well us sitting here going, oh, well, without the food noise, this is what it looked like. It may still be in the process of having a lot of food noise and guilt and judgment and all those thoughts kind of in your mind. I guess I would want to speak to that experience because I think that could be a large proportion of people who are listening. And again, so from my perspective, early on, I had made the mistake with intuitive eating of thinking that I was supposed to be so in touch with what I wanted. I wait till I'm hungry and then I see what I fancy and I find a way to give that to myself. And it wasn't working. I needed a little bit more structure and routine. So having staple food that can reduce the number of decisions that you make throughout the day, I think can be helpful. So like you with your eggs on toast, it's like, okay, most mornings, that's what you're just going to get up and do without thinking about it. I might approach it as like having these staple things that you have and then noticing if you have a time when you're like, actually, I don't fancy that, and always having permission to choose something different. But I think especially with something like breakfast to kind of set you up in the morning, I think that having a small pool of different breakfasts can just help with that process, because if there's a lot of noise and you have a lot of decisions to make, that could just feed the noise.
That's what I call I do go-to list in my course for that reason, to minimize decisions. But to go even further into it, where there's food noise and where we're still in recovery and still in disorder, sometimes nothing appeals to us because we're not allowing things in that we really want, because we've learned that like I can't be around these foods. These are the only acceptable guilt-free foods that I am allowed to pick from. And it's more you're learning about these things, something awakens inside saying like I want more than that. Like I want to have more fun foods. Like I want to have more things than just grilled chicken and salmon and kale, like, or salads or whatever. And sometimes this sense of I don't want anything or I don't know what to have can come from not having enough options available to you, and like something inside of you speaking up for that and saying, so a tool, I don't know, like a suggestion might be to, if this is a chronic thing for you, where might opening up your options into things that you normally wouldn't allow yourself to have, how can that safely be brought in, even if it's just one food? Like if you're only having certain kinds of breakfast that appeal to your sense of morality around food, and like something in you is saying, I don't want these anymore, might you bring in some fun cereal, or offer yourself some French toast or some waffles or something, like offer something new that you normally wouldn't offer yourself?
Well, I think you're speaking to the stage of exploration with food. We're exploring what's it like to give myself permission to have these foods. Can I enjoy these foods? How do I feel when I have these foods as well in different situations? Because there will be absolutely times when, let's take something like waffles or pancakes for breakfast. There are times when I would absolutely enjoy that as a breakfast, and other times where it would just make me feel sleepy.
Tired. Me too.
Yeah.
Me
Yeah.
too. But I
And
couldn't.
it's always a bit of a balance with me. When I see it, I'm like, I want the experience of eating that, and I will still want to be able to feel okay as well. And I'm trying to think like how I make the decision. I think they just have to be really good pancakes.
Yeah, same. It has to be like really good, because there's a physical feeling I get from it. However, I wouldn't have known that if I never offered it myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like part of learning our intuition around these things is having things and feeling what they make us feel like.
Yes.
Before recovery, I would have been like, oh, that'll make me tired. 'Cause that's what the books tell me. You know, that's what the sugar gurus tell me. And that was always coming from the outside versus me actually experiencing when I have those foods by themselves.
Yeah.
I do. But now it feels really like true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like not a should. It feels like an alignment. Therefore, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid to say I don't want to have waffles this morning because I don't want to get tired, because I know that. Like, not because I don't have it because it's the wrong thing to do. You know, like that's a totally different experience.
And also the feeling of guilt that will come when you eat something you think you're not supposed to do is going to make you feel heavier. Guilt is a heavy emotion. So I can eat pancakes and sometimes I might feel heavy and a bit tired afterwards, and there's no guilt attached to that. And I'm trying to think. I'm genuinely trying to think, when are the times that I say yes to the pancake, and when are the times when I think, oh, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And I can't really define. I would love to say like, oh, well, in these situations, I would be drawn to the pancake, and these situations I wouldn't. And it probably depends as well on the other options on the menu. I've ordered pancakes before just because the other options haven't been more appealing.
Do you remember when you and I went out to breakfast in New York about a year? Oh my gosh, is today a year since our workshop in New York City?
Was it 2nd of May?
I think it might have been, or around here. We went out to breakfast that trip twice. I remember we went to the same place twice. We went to the place in the morning, we went there again.
Yeah.
So I think the first morning I don't remember if it was pancakes or French toast or waffles, actually now. I don't remember which one it was. It was one of those. And I remember feeling like, I remember making that decision because I remember it isn't something I normally order because I get tired or whatever. And I don't think it came with like eggs or something. You know, it didn't have the protein on the side that I would normally, you know. But I was like, I'm having it because that restaurant was so cute, and the plates that they brought out, like, it looked so good. And it was like, okay, I don't make French toast like that at home. Like, this is like one of those opportunities to have something like that. B, we weren't hosting the event that day. So it wasn't like I needed to be energetic. You know, I would have
alert.
Like, yeah, it was like it was a laid back kind of day. C, I knew that we'd be eating other foods during the day that I could like nourish my body with more. So like there was like inherent balance in there. And also the D, 4, I hadn't had it in a really long time. And so it was one of those things where I was like I want it because I haven't had it in a really long time. Whereas I have eggs every day, you know what I mean? So those things together, plus I think part of the excitement of the weekend, and like I think we had just met up and it was like, yeah, and I was feeling a little bit more like fun. So those factors sort of combined. But then the next day I didn't have that, even though it was delicious. Actually, if I remember correctly, it wasn't as delicious. It was still good, but like it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. And I had a different, more practical breakfast that still appealed to my senses, and like I still love avocado toast and eggs. I like these things. It's not like I don't. But I chose that for different reasons the next day.
And even in that, because I just want to sort of speak to anybody who's listening to that, and then here's the danger, I think, with us talking about this, is that people hear how we're making decisions and they go, oh, that's how you make decisions. You can have the pancakes or the French toast if you know that you're going to be eating more nourishing foods later, or you can do this in this situation. And this is where, like, I mean, I guess the word permission is coming to mind, but permission to decide for ourselves.
Yeah.
What makes sense to us? If we were to strip the judgment away, and that's the challenge, that is the work, is stripping the judgment away, then what makes sense to us? Because we can hear what makes sense to someone else and go, oh, that sounds right, but then it's another moralization.
No, because to be honest with you, I hear you, and I think that's 100% true, and independent thinking is underpinning every single episode we have. But sometimes I will hear somebody, like I might have heard that before and been like, yes, like that feels true. Not that sounds true, but that feels true. And, you might also be like, that doesn't feel true. Like that feels like I have a different experience of something. And it's paying attention to your reactions to different options that people present or that you see or that you hear. That's part of how you're connecting to this episode, right? Like, or to anything that anybody says. It's not about what they're saying or what you're reading. It's about, this is an idea. How does that mesh with me? How does that idea, what do I need to, what feels true about that idea that can help me process something? And what doesn't feel true about that idea that can help me process something? And that, to me, I feel like the disclaimer is that when we talk about our stories or any ideas that we have or any of our experiences, that it comes with the understanding that, like, that's us. Here's some ideas. How does that help you process your own experience?
I just, when people are in pain and they're confused, we're looking for an answer. And I guess I wanted to highlight that so that you could kind of stress exactly what you stressed there. Because it's not listening to someone and going like, oh, that's how you make decisions. But it's listening and going like, look, I'm just going to end up repeating what you said. So I'm going to stop there because I'm just literally going to like paraphrase you at this point.
But that's also, that's also part of learning, because I feel like at a time in my life where I wanted to offload, where I was in so much pain that I couldn't think for myself and I just wanted an answer and I clawed at anything on the outside, those experiences, because that's where I was in my process at that time, ultimately did become a way of saying of what I rejected and accepted, because I was like, when I do that, it feels like this. When I look for the answer out here, I end up here. That ultimately, I think, leads to being able to become more self-identified, because you're like, I've been seeking outside of myself for so long and it keeps leading me here feeling like this. So maybe I need to go this way. I think it can be part of the process. It's all designed. We designed this podcast to promote whatever phase you're in.
We cast such a wide net.
No, your points are totally valid and should have probably gone at the beginning.
Your points are so valid as well, Stefanie.
I mean, if we'd made a list, I think there would have been maybe some other things that I would have brought up, but I think we still covered things I wouldn't have put on the list. So it's all the same. If you have a question, or if we didn't cover something that you would have wanted to see in this episode when you clicked on the title, let us know. We are here.
We're here. You're listening to us. We're listening to you.
Okay.
Go
forth. Good people. See you next week.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.